Thank you. Sorry, I feel like I'm not really being very good at the introduction, so we can jump right into it. But I think, thanks everyone for coming today and joining the Roundtable. We're here on the occasion of the exhibition that you've created called Conversations. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into the conversation. But before I do, I'll just go around the room and kind of say who we've got. So we've got Kemi Onabulé, Sumuyya Khader. We've got Simone Brewster. I'm Chloe Austin. We've got Zinzi Minott, Sharon Walters, and Bokani. So a great group of fantastic artists today. And the first question I wanted to throw out to the group is, when did you know you wanted to be an artist? And how did you go about pursuing this path? If anyone wants to start. Sharon?
Did I look like I wanted to? Yeah.
Ready for it.
So I wanted to be an artist for as long as I can remember, really, from childhood. It's all I've ever wanted to do. Literally all I've really ever wanted to do. But my route to becoming an artist was really, I always say that I took the scenic route. So I did lots of different things. I couldn't go to art school initially because it was too expensive. So my family couldn't afford for me to go, which I completely understand. So I did a different degree, and then I went on to my 30s do a fine art degree eventually, but did another degree before that, and then did various jobs. Some of them art related, some of them not. But now I'm what I guess we call a full-time artist, and I have been for the last 5 years. But I see all of those different jobs as kind of, I guess they were valid. I just couldn't see it at the time. It was just a bit annoying that I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. But I always loved drawing, less so now actually, but loved drawing when I was really young. And yeah, so it feels good to be in this space now and to be doing this and to be in this show as well.
Yeah, I think my route was very similar, actually. I don't know the answer to that question of when did I know I wanted to be an artist, because I think that's a lot more about what I knew at the time. And I don't know, I mean, I have an older cousin and she studied art, so I think there was she's 5 years older than me. And so I think there was something that I understood about what she was doing, but I didn't grow up going to galleries. I didn't grow up like consuming art in the way I practiced art. So there's definitely something I didn't know was possible. And I think that's very true. But I always danced since I was very young, and when it came to going to uni, I said to my mum, I either want to study law, fashion or dance. And she said to me, you don't need a degree to do fashion or dance, so do law. So that's what I did. I qualified as a lawyer, I was working as a lawyer, and I auditioned for dance school when I was writing my dissertation on Stop and Search at uni. Didn't get in, so came back to London and worked in a firm for 6 months and re-auditioned and got in and quit my job. And went back to dance school and then did another degree. So it was very scenic. And I think the transition from dance, or like working between dance and fine art, really happened because dance is very conservative. It's more conservative than fine art. It's more monocultured than fine art. And there just isn't much space even now to be discursive. It's like it's just not handled well within the dance world. And so I think I naturally was pulled into the fine art space, having been hanging around with a lot of like other queer young artists, some of which are in the show, and they were like, you can come to this thing, it's called live art. I was like, whoa, I can be like a freak on stage, I can like dance and be queer and everything's all really weird, and that I think was the transition for me. But yeah, it was very scenic, and took me a while to appreciate my other training. Actually, for a long time I just thought I'd wasted time.
It can be frustrating, can't
Yeah,
it?
you feel really frustrated, I think, for whatever reason, and however it is that you end up on the kind of like scenic route on that little shopper bus going around town. You know that there's a direct route that you just, for whatever reason, can't access. And I think that can be hard, but at some point it starts to match up. And I think like now I think a lot about legislation, and I know that's because of my legal training, for example, and that now it feels I'm a bit more at peace with it now as well.
I guess the two paths kind of at some point come together, and then you're like, okay, now I know what this was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But what I think is interesting for me is whenever I speak to people of colour, not just black people, but I think it happens to Asian people as well, quite a bit in their culture, is there's a whole thing about, because what you said they couldn't afford it, but then you said, and then I went to do a BA or BSc,
Sure.
and you said the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's actually not that they necessarily can't afford it, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
It's that we have to go through a barrier of convincing our parents that what we are trying to
Or
do is
defying them.
actually valid.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
they couldn't
Define
afford
them.
it because with the fine art,
Wasn't funded.
it wasn't funded.
Yeah,
Right.
they
Whereas
haven't
the
all been
degree,
funded.
with the degree,
yeah.
you could get a grant.
Yeah,
and I
true.
couldn't get a
Yeah,
grant
that's
for my
true.
unconditional offer. And I was
Yeah.
like, no.
This is it. That's
Yeah.
so on
That's
certain courses they have that, and
and
others
others they don't. And so it kind of pushes back a whole
It still
community
reflects
of
the
people.
culture, though.
Yeah.
Like, it reflects the culture
true.
that, you know, I don't know what your other degree was, but like a more humanities or science degree is valued, so we will fund it for black and brown people who can't afford. But art is more elite and less valued, so you can. So in a way, they kind of
Or it's valued
connect.
in a different way, because art is about creating culture, and we're not part of necessarily creating culture in this
that's
country.
so true.
So we are not necessarily looked upon to do that.
To have
So,
access
but
it,
it's a cyclical thing, because I know that. So I never wanted to be an artist. Actually, I wanted to be an architect. That's always what I wanted to be since I was 6 years old. I went to the Caribbean, and I was always good at drawing and maths and blah blah blah. And I remember staying in families' houses and going to various places, and always feeling like the space was really hot. And then went to one environment, and it was really cool inside. And I was like to my dad, "Why is it so cool inside? Do they have air conditioning or whatever?" And he was like, "No, my cousin designed it. He's an architect." So I realised you could design environments that actually impact people's lives. So I wanted to be an architect. But it's only through going through the process of going to university, I studied architecture, and then making stuff in the workshop, and then I kind of took a time out and did a master's in product design, which was really just 2 years playing around in a workshop and having fun, and decided not to go back to architecture. But when I look at that journey, part of that journey is because I didn't even know a thing existed. This doesn't exist in my world. And when you realise at my age that actually there are very direct avenues, there's, you know, thinking back to that girl at secondary school who had to, you know, tick boxes about what she wanted to study. Being a sculptor wasn't even a concept in my brain. I didn't even know it existed, which is ridiculous living in a city that has sculptures
on every corner.
But maybe it's because the sculptures didn't relate to me. They're not sculptures of people who look like me. They're not sculptures from my time in history, and it's not something So I feel like there are layers of barriers that are built into the way that we perceive art and the value of art within our culture, the way that we understand, as well as, you know, the time we're introduced to it as a concept in our lives, like as a teenager. Is it a thing? How do I live off of this? How do I convince my mom and dad that them investing money for me to go and have an education in this is going to pay off, not just literally because of the, you know, fee, but pay off for my life. Do you know what I mean?
I was going to say, it's also the concept of not necessarily that you can't afford to go to study it, but also can you afford to make that your career? Because you know, if you've got you know, responsibilities, or you know, or responsibility to your family to earn your own living, and then it can be very hard to persuade people.
But it was so interesting in my family 100%. Because there were so many people who were creatives. So my dad's brothers and sisters were artists, fashion designer, photographer. So I grew up seeing it, but it was just, there was that outside barrier that kind of stopped. There was that outside barrier of, you know, like you were saying, you just can't, we're going to ensure that you don't get in at this point.
Also, maybe this idea of formalised art is not something the countries or the cultures the majority of immigrants come from. It's not, in this country at least, it's not around formalised art, it's around cultural art. It's about the culture comes together to create something that we recognise as art, that, you know, fulfills us through our, you know, through music, through dance, through sculpture, but we understand it, you know, from all levels, whereas the art made in the West is separate from society in many ways, and doesn't really, the fact that a lot of us don't interact with art, Western ideas of art, And so we have to enter into it rather than being immersed in it. I think our families are immersed in their art. So it's seen as craft. And back home,
that's true.
their lineages are, there's lineage dedicated to this art. I have grandparents who were goldsmiths and artists. But in a modern context, my dad's an artist, but he had to fight to be an artist. And they didn't, he was a lawyer. They didn't understand it. But there's that in their history, but they didn't understand why he would want to go and do this new context of art. And maybe I've benefited from his arguments.
Yeah, sure, you do, right?
I've had an easier route. Due to, so now maybe I'm back in the lineage, the idea of a family facilitating a way of working, or you know, a cultural like role almost. But I think that does impact why we all, or why a lot of people, particularly black and brown, have to fight so hard. It's like,
I think it's also though, like, I mean, obviously there's so many different contexts in which we come from, even around this table, but I think from my context, like I come from some of the poorest immigrants in this country. And so I'm not from like a black middle class. I'm not from like the property owning part of the Caribbean community. Like we are poor. We are poor. And I think like culture then becomes this like, because culture in the UK is also linked to leisure. Right? And like if you are from an immigrant family where you are either the people earning the money, your parents, your guardians, whomever, are either working all the time or don't work, then their access to leisure becomes a very different thing. So for me, like it wasn't, like my family is very musical. My dad is a DJ, he DJs at all the family parties. I grew up with a sound system in my house. My mum dances and sings all day. But does she take her leisure time to go an hour and plus to central London to look at pictures?
no.
Like conceptually, that's just wild.
Or to
like,
even access dance.
Outside of the community, like you're saying, this is just not going to happen.
It's not external from their day-to-day experience.
Exactly.
But do you think for me, I've been really resistant to call myself an artist because I think I feel guilty. But I think it's this idea of like, how people perceive an artist is not how an artist is. It's like we always talk about it. It's like you do many things beyond your art that
mostly
contributes to
mostly emails.
Like, can you pay this invoice, please?
Hello.
43. Do you know what I mean? But I think like we don't have the luxury to walk into a space and someone goes, "What do you do?" and you go, "I'm an artist," because they're like, "Oh, you've got it easy."
Or they don't believe you. I feel like people don't believe me, to be honest.
That's an interesting one. I think it's both. Because if we're honest, there's also a very strong narrative within Western culture of the struggling artist. So it's like, oh, I remember standing next to someone who was a Turner Award nominee, and the person who was being introduced to didn't know him. It was just a gathering as a barbecue. And they went, "So what do you do?" And he said, "I'm an artist." And they were like, "Oh, how's that going up for you then?"
I'm better than you.
He didn't say
I'm probably really good.
I'm really good.
It's really interesting because there are two ways of looking at it.
It's true actually.
And actually part of what we're fighting against is the struggling artist for us to have the privilege to even study art. So let's go back down that concept in studying it or whatever. We have to overcome the barrier of the struggling artist, and then when you are an artist, you have you're an artist. So it's like there's no winning in this.
Do you know what I've had a few times as well? I've had the people say, "Oh, an artist. Oh, you sing."
Yes, every time.
People always think I'm
that is what's
a hip hop
happened to
dancer.
me
I
as
wonder
well.
why.
All the
That's
time.
interesting because you said people
that's
think you're a
true.
singer, and then you said people think you're a hip hop dancer.
Yeah, all the time.
really?
Yeah,
Is it
all the
the
time. Or a stripper.
stereotype?
I've had both. Quite frequently. Like, and it's not like there's nothing wrong with stripping. There's nothing wrong with being a hip hop dancer. I just happen to go to ballet school.
Yeah.
Like, so like this just doesn't relate to my narrative. But I do think that both being black and being a woman and being like hypersexualized and also being perceived as being very aggressive, you get pigeonholed into like two specific cultures, not cultures, but like mediums, and the idea that like I could have even had the experiences that I've had, which is to say like I went to one of the best dance schools in the world. People don't think that happened to me. They just don't think that when I tell them where I went, they're like,
or that you can be critical about your practice. And it goes back to what you said about defining and shaping culture and who gets to do that. I think a lot about, you know, my early journey in deciding to be, like, I can almost picture the exact moment. And it's funny when you were saying like the scenic route, because I was on pilgrimage in northern Spain. And so like we'd walked all day for about 20 hours. And it was this mountains called Montserrat, serrated mountains. If you think, every time you think you've got to the top, it's like, oh no, you've still got.
Sounds like life.
So I've got there. No, I haven't.
And it's very much like being an artist.
And
I'd gone in my like very yuppie. It was like late 20s, early 30s. I've always had this sort of personality of feeling like I must have survived my life for a reason. I must have gotten all the opportunities for a reason. So this expression about like feeling guilty sometimes of saying, oh, I could have been an investment banker and I chose not to be. I had a tech startup and I chose that wasn't my path. And so I was really carrying this emotional baggage with me of, I feel called to this thing. And I was painting. At that point, I'd been painting every day for a few years, but it was because of all the social history. It was like, oh, that's a hobby if you can afford to have one. That's lovely for you. But because my family wanted to keep me from the precarity from which we'd come, they were like, why would someone with an intellectual like bend, if you're smart enough to be all these other things, why would you choose to go in any other direction?
That is true.
And I was, so I'd studied politics, and I'd gone on this pilgrimage because I felt like, you know, I'm approaching my 30s, I was maybe in my early 30s, and I was like, I felt the need to commit to something in my life and to have a direction that wasn't necessarily, and I'm raised Catholic, so this was like following the footsteps of a Catholic saint, which has many other complications, but I can come back to that. And this question of what is my purpose was really on my mind. Like I'd taken that as my question for the pilgrimage. It was 10 days. And I got to this mountaintop, and yes, there was a monk, didn't speak English. And I was like, I've been praying all day. I've not heard God's response. I've been praying with this question of, should I be an artist? Should I follow this path? And he was like German, Spanish speaking. And I'm like, I have tiny bits of French and English mostly, but I got across that I was praying about something, but I didn't say what it was. And he's like, you know, we have a really nice collection of paintings that you can go and pray with. And I'm like, God can sometimes, for me anyway, not be subtle. This was one of those moments. And I thought, oh, cute, these Benedictine monks have like some watercolors.
Wow, the disrespect in my statement. Wow, the disrespect.
You're not wrong.
Give me that pen and paper. Piece of paper.
So in my mind, I was like, great. The only people who can afford to be artists are people whose income is subsidized, is not even subsidized. Their whole lifestyle is funded by the church. And all their food is taken care of, their shelter is taken care of. They've got time to think and read and paint these, in my head, watercolors. I go down to this, like, they have this beautiful, the whole monastery is built into this cave. I go down into the basement. Do they not have like Caravaggios? Do they not
Say,
have...
I knew it.
My guy!
He's
my guy! He's my guy!
We love him.
Yeah. I'm really disturbed by how much, like, because he's quite a violent guy. Like,
but like no one can paint black like him.
Yeah.
I just...
He's crazy.
And to see his, do you see his work in a church as it was?
No,
yeah,
so this was a gallery made for praying with art.
Wow.
So, and people when they die, and I'm saying people, but what I mean is like rich people.
Yeah.
When they died, they'd given some of their collections to these monks
wow.
because so many pilgrims go there.
Right.
So they left Matisse.
No.
OG.
This story. Where can we get the address?
Yeah.
But after walk for 10 days, I saw
The next round table.
It was,
Yeah.
Good.
but
Fully
to me,
funded.
it suggested like so many things. One was that like this thing that you're called to will find you wherever you go. It will, and the message will keep coming to you.
Yeah.
The other thing was that this was finally something I could bring my whole history to. I could bring my womanhood. I could bring my Africanness. I could bring my conflicted faith. I could bring all these questions, which in a startup, in an investment bank, in all these careers, I'd have to leave parts of myself outside because, I mean, whether those parts are safe in the art world is a different question, but I'd have to leave parts of myself out and I'd have to curate this sort of vision of who I am. And it was skewed and shrunken and narrow. And I was finally like, oh, I can really live into myself. And then I applied for like an art competition just because I wanted to test out, not test God, but like, does my
test
work
God, but
stand
test God.
out?
Tell me
Because I
again,
think that's
Joji. Tell me again.
I was like, does my work stand out enough for me for this to be a career? So if I apply to something where people don't know my background and can't choose me because I'm a black woman, or not choose me because of that, what will happen? And that's when I was like, okay, if I get this, then I will then make the commitment. For me, it's more like a vocation, for richness, for poor, health and sickness. I could imagine myself on a sick bed and still doing little drawings and still reading about like some historic like coding system. I could not imagine a condition in life in which I wouldn't still be able to make something. And that was incredibly powerful for me.
I think that when I realised that was when I said, in a way, that then I relaxed.
So
That was
Okay,
fine.
that's interesting.
Yeah, because the way, if you look at how the world works now in terms of sharing your work and who you are in the art world or not, I don't feel like I'm anyone in the art world. But no, I don't. No. Sorry, the point isn't to say I am or I'm not. That's actually besides the point. The point is you go on Instagram and someone's got whatever number of followers, and so it makes you start to think,
It's true.
I need to post
What am I
today.
doing?
Mate, it's so tedious. And then actually this is when I'm glad I'm not really in my brain. I'm not. My roots are from a different part of creativity. When I started in architecture, and then I look across and I look at the women who are not necessarily black but had to work in the art world, and you look at like Louise Bourgeois, died at 99. If I die at 99 and I just make one good thing a year, I've got an amazing body of work. So then I'm like, you know what? Why am I pressing myself? And then I just relax. I go, I'm going to be doing this anyway. I was doing this before I was doing this. Do you know what I mean? You were doing this when you were at home, just thinking of doing it.
Yeah.
You were doing it before, you're going to do it after. I'm going to do it if I have my followers, I'm going to do it if I don't have my followers. And then you just relax.
I don't.
And you just
I
make
don't
your
relax
work.
at
Or
all.
at least I do.
Yeah, I feel and I'm listening to you and I covet that. I covet that kind of like peace because I think, and maybe it's because like I come from a family of activists and those that kind of weren't activists, like a couple like early black women academics who were writing about the spaces that my family were building for black people. So it was all my whole, like my cousin always says, we didn't have a religion. If we had a religion, our family was blackness. Like that was really how I was raised. And so I think I feel this like injustice that happens to black women, and like I can't relax with it. I get really incensed with the fact that you don't get acknowledged till you're 60 or 70 and you'll be like nominated for the Turner Prize, and all the other artists of all different colors will be in their 20s or 30s. And then I think about myself in my like late 30s and think, okay, can I sustain this now? This position, like will I be able to do this if they either ignore me or maintain the recognition at this level for 25 years? Like how can I live with that?
You can.
You don't know though, because people are stopping now. I have friends who are already like, I can't do it. So we can't say, we'll see, but we can't. The corrosion of the disrespect, the ignoring, it is like putrid and poisonous, and some people cannot sustain it. And I know people right now who are like, I am done, and it's painful to watch them.
And it's not
I'm
just
not
this
done.
generation of artists, right? Because like
No.
you know, you had the, I guess what I see as a bit of a generation before people around this table, like the Bainer Hamids.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
slightly so, like, you know, I don't know if generation is the right word, but you know, working in the 80s.
Sure.
And you know, they produced a book called Passions about Black women's creativity.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a brilliant book.
Yeah.
If you can get hold of a copy. But you know, I've gone through that book, and so many of the, you know, the women in this book, women artists, you know, you Google and they're not making work anymore. Nothing comes up.
Yeah.
You Google the name, you Google art, and nothing comes up because they've dropped out or for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So you know, it's an interesting question I want to throw to you, because I feel like, you know, obviously got different opinions on it. Dropping out of it becoming too much, the power structures, you know, just getting too much to bear in the arts. Is there a way to retain, you know, to maintain your position in the arts, and to, I guess, retain power, agency, keep going? I mean, it's different for every person, but what would you say is your approaches, or approaches you've seen for other people? Is it possible against the immovable force that is
I think
power
in a
structures
way
existence?
to capitalism.
Yeah.
I think keeping aware of one's context, like we're in Britain. Britain has its history. Its history is one of repression, slavery, you know, capitalizing on people who look like us. And so we will never be the majority. We will never understand the idea to repress somebody that much that you'll go and do all sorts of things for it. So there's a psychology that I'm many generations in this country. I have English family. I have an understanding maybe or proximity to it, which sometimes makes it harder to, you know, cope with. So because of that, I feel this immense feeling that I have to keep expanding outside of the borders, the boundaries, the context, to elevate myself outside of just one country, because that is also a privilege, and that comes from maybe a generation seeing my parents do that, and now I know it's possible. I'm like, there's a chink in the wall, and I can look through that wall and I see it above that massive border that is our context. There's a different context. It might not be that much better, but it's something. It's different, and you don't have to leave this context, but I think keeping one's mind open to communicating, connecting in your context, and then broadening that has always been a way that people with politics and art have kind of pushed things forward. It's very hard to do things just in your locality, because people, they have the power to ignore you, I think. If you bother them too much, they'll just be like, well, it's not giving you.
I don't think we bother them enough.
We don't bother, not by bother them, I mean, exist. Or just say one thing, say an
just upset somebody. Come at it the wrong way and you're done for
But I'm
6
like,
to 8.
if I hit something, I'm like, okay.
You know?
It's true.
It's like this, but that's hard. That takes a lot, and it's very difficult because we're all sensitive and you know, fragile people. We can't constantly be reimagining ourselves.
Not just reimagining, but just existing and pushing. I guess the reason why I was saying you can is because I've quit
and you're back
and I'm here. but I really quit though. I was like, I told my mom. I told my mom. Now that's important because like my mom's my person. And I was like, Mom, I'm done. And she was so upset, but she was like, I understand. Because it was like the sacrifices I had to make to achieve anything were massive. And looking at my peers who were not black female, what they were achieving, and and I remember talking to my best friend who's one of them who's Portuguese, and she was like, at one point she said to me, do you think it's because you're black? And I was like, and I love her for it, because the thing is, for her to say that, you know, she's been thinking it for a while. You know what I mean? She's been seeing what I've been doing, but she doesn't want to put that on me because she knows that I can't change that. Like, there's
Yeah.
no, it's not like saying,
better
you
it's
think you
something
could,
else.
yeah, do you think it's
Yeah.
because that wasn't such a good concept?
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't a good concept,
You
we
can
could talk
rework
about
that.
it
Yeah.
and she could give me advice, but she can't advise me on being black. So she left that in her brain for, I know, a long time before she put that on the table. And I was like, you know what, in a way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's not that it doesn't matter that it's there, it's that I can't change that. So so that's going to be a non-factor of changing. I've got to either decide to live with it or not. Now, a few years later, I was like, I'm done. And what I realised for myself was I still didn't stop making work. It changed my relationship to how my work lived in my life. And it became more like how we were discussing it before. Your mom is singing when she's doing the this or dancing. It became part of me in a different way than I was trying to have it do before. Because I think the way that we have in the Western world, we want our thing to be our life.
Yeah.
And so it has to be, if I'm an artist, I have to have and whatever the stupid list that society tells you have to have. No. If you're an artist, you're an art. I remember doing a talk once and saying I'd like to one day be an artist. And afterwards, a woman in the audience came up to me and was like, "You are an artist," and that's the difference. It's just like you can talk about quitting, and maybe they didn't publish this. Trust me, they're still doing their work, and existence in this.
Making, because
True.
you know, I
It's
trained
okay.
as a dancer. Like,
True.
I envisioned productions and sets and scenography and sound scores that are 4 hours long. But most importantly, and I had this conversation with my partner last year, so December 2023, I had an I'm done moment. And I called about 10 people who I love and respect very deeply, who have known me for at least 5 years plus. And I said to them all, I'm thinking about quitting, what do you think? And I had serious conversations with people, like serious, like to the core conversations. And everyone just said, wait, just wait, just give it a second. But one of the things that people kept saying was very similar to what you're saying, which is you'll still go on. Like, it's not, but the thing that became very clear to me through that conversation was that it is very important to me that my work is seen.
Right.
Part of the work being lived, being viewed, being witnessed, it bouncing off people, the feedback loop. Like, and that might be because I trained in performance, but it might be for a variety of reasons. But I think it is perfectly real and true what that woman said to you. You are an artist. But it is also real and true that there is a difference between everybody who says they're an artist being an artist and having the luxury and the privilege and the enjoyment of making work that is seen and witnessed and having the privilege of making a small statement about you, your life, your culture, your community in the public realm. And I think for me, that is a part of my practice. It's not just that I make things and that they live in my house. It's that they commune and are seen. And if somebody, the hard part about that is that as an artist, that is not all you're in control of.
No.
You're not like, and that is where the real power, you start to feel the power and the impact of your relationship with power. If you say the wrong thing, if you display your politics in public, if you tell people that they're racist, if you advocate for other people's rights, you can be done. And that power, that like arm of power can come down very hard.
I think the power translates in like a couple of different ways. The one way that I think is entirely true is especially in how it relates to whether you can continue a practice at a particular level. Both you know, have a home and be able to have time to read and think about that next show. There's a way of practicing that is possible when you assimilate to the power structures. There's also a part of me that I've been questioning recently, like, what is the function of art? And what is the function of my practice in society? What do I aspire for that to be? And some of those things, when I look back at the other generation before us, both in this country, and I'm from Zimbabwe, in Zimbabwe also, there's a couple of things that like crop up for me. And one of them is, if you want to be changing society with art, and I don't know if I'm losing faith in the idea that that's possible, but if you do want to change society with your art, maybe it's not going to be in a big gallery. Maybe for it to be effective at that function, maybe it's not going to be in these spaces that we want, because they would also give us some stability financially and economic security. And then the other function of art that I think about comes from this like spiritual and faith traditions, where I've seen art as a way of allowing people to come together. So within our communities, how art has functioned. But also even when I think about artifacts, as we now call them, that are in different museums, people have been creating beautiful things for the longest time. And to your point about lineages,
are still valued.
and are still valued. But those objects for a while were also, yes, part of communing with ancestors and a greater sense of time and history, but they were also part of sovereignty. You know, you handed a particular object on, and it was a part of a legitimate political system and civilization. And so like when we think about what is our art doing now, is our art propping up like current capitalism? What are our objects going to be doing later?
We're in capitalism,
I
so we
think
can't be
that's
outside of it. We can be both, though, I
But
think.
is it propping it up, or is it challenging it?
I do
Yeah,
think there's
sure.
something in that as well, of, since this is a conversation of people who derive from immigrants mainly, but I do think when you arrive in a place, your whole job is to shore yourself up,
Right.
and to build yourself up, and to create stability, and it is rammed into you as a child.
That's why so many black artists have got like legal qualifications and medical qualifications and engineers.
And then you go into something that is the opposite of that. But the world it's built around, particularly the economic world and the art world, is the zenith. It's the top of capitalism.
Absolutely.
To take an object and ascribe it value and give it extreme value, and at the same time say it's not about that, is a really a mind F for people who come from instability, who are trying to, and so to kind of to say what you're saying about you are an artist, I think that's important, to kind of imbue yourself with that innate value outside of this system, simply because it could mess with your mind. Even when you're really successful, even if you're never successful, even at the top, even if people really are looking at your work, you still have to maintain that sense of innate value. And that is like, I've been lucky, I've had a lot of things happen in the last year, but it's been destabilizing in some ways because it's an external validation. I still have to find that validation inside for my art. But that's, that's again quite complicated, I think.
Can I say thank you for that? Because that's actually what I think I was trying to articulate, and the point that I was making of saying even that I had said I'm going to stop. Because in the end, the energy to continue comes from the idea that I am an artist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the idea that people believe as well. Go into my community and say, like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Correct. And
then reflecting back to
yourself.
Me. Yeah, you need that.
And that was the second point I was going to make, is that what I realised when I did that and said I'm going to stop is I took away all my power. And then that's when, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this, but that's when people really started to fuck with me. And that's when I had another call with my best friends.
It's actually not because you're black.
This is my fault. I've given up my power. And that's so, I should thank them for fucking with me, because now they're forcing me to step back into myself, and I'm never going to do that again. That was a conversation I had to have with her. And she was like, yeah, you sound like yourself again. But the thing is, I had to give up to do that as well. Do you understand? And I understand the thinking behind it, because I'm looking left and right, people I studied with, some of them are building pavilions for the Olympic Games. Some of them are, and I'm serious, some of them are building some of the skyscrapers in the UK. Some of them are like the most renowned up and coming UK designers in the world. It's all this stuff. And then you're like, and yeah, I'm just living in a
Trying to buy
one
my Pret
bedroom
sandwich,
flat.
like.
I just moved out of my parents' house a couple of years ago because I just all that time was investing my own money in my work and blah blah. And then you look at all of that, but that's and then you go, I just want my life to move forward. And so it's valid. What I'm trying to, I guess, if someone's listening to us, not everyone will be around this round table. Not everyone will be invited to an amazing show. Thank you. To be involved with amazing other artists. That doesn't. And what I want them to know is that doesn't disqualify them.
No,
and that's
of course
what
it doesn't.
But I loved what you said, because what you said also is something that I say is, when the art is seen, that's when it's finished for me. Because I didn't even realise I was making art. I thought I was making furniture. I was making sculpture until it was seen. And then I realised it's actually only a sculpture or a piece of art because it's furniture. But it's actually art, because we can't have these conversations in the furniture world.
And, like, I'm sorry.
It's all right, go ahead.
When I finished installing the show, I don't know if you were there, but there was a few people in the room, and I'd had a bumpy year, partly because it started with me thinking I'm done with my practice, and also because I'd had some health stuff happen, and we'd finished, and we're like, okay, you know, and I'm wiping off the platform, and I'm like, it's done. And I was just looking at it and I was feeling tearful. I feel tearful now. And I said, you know what, if I saw this work every day, I would never doubt myself. And so it's not actually just about other people witnessing, like you need to be with your practice. And that object had been in a box for 6 months because nobody had put it anywhere, right? Because it's also, if you make something this big, you can live with it. But like, this is a 6 foot tall sculpture. It had been living in a box in storage. But actually standing in front of it, I was able to see who made it. It just so happened to be me. But actually, I think anybody can have that experience standing in front of that sculpture. Like, and I need that experience as a Black woman in London, trying to survive as much as anybody. I need that work to speak back to me and say, go on.
Work can exist for its maker as much as it exists.
That I need to exist in the world.
Exactly. And I've forgotten who made that object. Like, I've forgotten, like, all those people saying to me, this is not possible. Do you know how many engineers, fabricators said, this is not possible? Curator said, you will never fund this. And that person who fought for that work for 10 years to make that work had really, like, she'd gotten small and tired and fatigued, and when it was like out of the box, and I was like, shit, that was me. And that strength comes back. And I think that's also what like the gift and the power of curatorial power is actually. And that's, you can't give that to yourself as an artist, especially when you start to work at a particular literal dimensional scale. You can't always do that for yourself. Other people have to reach into your practice and say, you know, and that's that power that I'm also talking about.
I feel also that it's an issue with the system though for me. Like I feel guilty calling myself a curator because I think it's a BS job. Like, no, in a way, no, in
that
a
is
way,
the shot of the talk, isn't it? Really?
In a way that, like, all of a sudden, I have the power to say whether that should be in a space or shouldn't be in a space over you. And it's your story. It's your narrative. It's your work. So for me, I find it really weird. I think the best curators are people who've experienced the art, who are practicing artists or live with practicing artists because they understand the relationship that person has to that object, to that piece, the significance of it, the fact that you saying, can I move that just like a meter this way and put a sign on it, actually does affect the art. Not everyone gets that. And I think I'm quite naive in a way that I think systematically the way that we view art, that's the problem. Like, we're all bound to these funding opportunities. We're all competing against the same things. We get told, like, oh, well done for making it this far. 2,000 people applied this year. And it's like, that shouldn't be the goal. It shouldn't be the fact that there's this tiny pot that you fight over. Who's made the pot?
It's like crabs in a barrel, kind of like
the queen of not
and it's like space as well. It's like, oh, because it's this museum or this gallery, I'm shown there, and now that's what I lead my bio with. What's wrong with the gallery that more people see? What's wrong with the gallery that more of us see? That doesn't have a name. What's wrong with the open door where you walk past and you go, whoa, what's going on in here? Like, it's an energy, and I think we need to get back to like, art is about attracting people. It's about emitting something.
Yeah.
And having people be like,
what was that?
I am drawn to this.
But maybe we feel that particularly. Sorry.
No,
Chloe,
you go.
you go. Okay.
Oh.
But I just feel like there's, you know, maybe 30, 40 years ago when we were talking about Lubina Hamed and a lot of the artists that she came up around, they self-started a lot of these spaces and a lot of these groups.
Yeah.
That curators then were like, well, they're all together. Let's just put them in a show.
sure,
They're already
sure,
together.
sure.
Let's just do that. It didn't take much imagination because they're self-generating, and with capitalism, it kind of splinters people off. The longer capitalism takes effect, the more isolated we become. Therefore, the more reliant we are on applications and
Do you know
this
our
and
goals are part of that?
So
So, do you think our goals, like what we aspire to now,
for
is
sure,
different for that generation?
but also what we have access to. If you don't have access to cheap space, you think,
then your goals become different,
more
right?
money.
Like, exactly. Because
I need
also,
more this.
you can have a council house or buy a dilapidated house in Brixton, which is now worth 3 million, but when you bought it, you could just walk in.
Yeah.
So then you're not like. So
As an
many of
immigrant.
people my age, I feel are just like, I just want a house.
Same.
Just want a house.
Literally.
Just like really like breathlessly like wanting a house.
Yeah.
But I think like I'm not saying that everybody got a house at that point, but a lot of, if you look at that generation of artists, a lot of them are in houses that they've either owned for a long time, they've got long-term contracts with council buildings. I know some of them have bought their council flat and are renting it out to our generation of artists and have second homes. You know, for who that applies to, feeling your feelings, or they manage to be in housing co-ops. So of course, as capitalism like stretches out longer in front of us, our desires have to change because what we're getting changes. So now I want a house, but also I want to buy my studio. The need to buy my studio starts to get bigger and bigger because right now my current studio is in an old housing association which is going to be knocked down, which was somebody's home at some point because of course as an artist I'm in the massive gentrification cycle and I both lose and take part in it and benefit from it. So when HS2 is finished, I'm going to have no studio. This is not a sustainable model, but 30, 40 years ago, everyone didn't need to think like that. I didn't mean some people weren't. I'm sure some people were. But the need and the imperative for that has changed.
I'm thinking of leaving the UK.
And that's also happening.
Where are you
going? Out.
That is such a normal conversation right now for me, like, to have with people. Because it's not really sustainable to live in
It's
London.
not sustainable.
But I get it.
Really,
Studios are like the price of a mortgage every
that's what I was
month.
gonna
I've been
say.
looking at what I've paid over the last year, and it's just, it's out of control.
Yeah.
It's out of control. I just
And that-
can't
and I don't want
imagine
two
being
landlords.
able to-
Stable job.
Yeah.
Imagine throwing yourself in as an artist.
as a just a young graduate or whatever.
I want to cut in because I feel like we're getting into the economics, which is very important and definitely true. But I want to ask, within like all of that context of like trying to sustain within all this instability, especially with this current moment, like what is when the artwork is on the wall in the exhibition in conversations next to all of these brilliant artists, and you've got people coming in, like what is the kind of reaction or the moments of connection that make it that make you want to continue doing it in the face of all of this, which is
Well, I think it is exhibitions like conversations, and for me, I feel that they are quite rare exhibitions to be invited to be part of. But being part of this has been a big, for me, psychologically, a big game changer. Being seen in the context of all these brilliant artists has been wonderful. And I think one of the highlights for me, yes, it was great seeing the work, and it was great going to the exhibition, but it was the evening, the bit afterwards. Felt so special. Because when we talk about connection, how connected do I feel to everyone? We're all doing our own thing. We might bump into each other at a private view. We might talk about having a studio visit and never get round to it, and then another year has passed. We're going to make it happen.
I know. I've been inviting myself to lunch at Simone's house.
Yeah, it's happening. Trust me.
diaries out afterwards.
Diaries out.
I think that night when we had the opening night and there were quite a few of us all in the same room, I took a few moments and I videoed, I don't know if anyone knew, but I videoed the entire room.
I never saw it on your Instagram, but I wasn't
didn't
there,
share
but I
it,
saw it on
but
some
I
people's
just-
Instagrams. I was like, on everyone's the stories,
beautiful.
every story I clicked on was people at the opening. And I was like,
But it was, for me, it was, you know, the bit afterwards where we got to talk and we actually got to be with each other. That bit for me was really, really special because I feel like sometimes you're just all doing things separately.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was a coming together, but it felt like potentially it could be the start of something.
Yeah.
And that's what I was hoping it could be, was, you know, the start of something where we do connect more.
I think when you're talking about with being separated off as well as a visual artist particularly, or makers of objects, it's like I often feel this, like, terrible thing to say, but deeply dissatisfied through the lack of personal connection that my work is bringing me, and maybe I need to infuse some element of performance or community in it. But I do think if you come from a very community-based space or practice, or you're a performer, you're a dancer, so I think when you don't do that, you have to retrofit that in, and that takes a lot of effort outside of being in the studio. And then compound that with being sometimes often the only black person in the room. I mean, I've stopped going to openings recently, one, because I don't have time. I have a family, I've got work, all of that. But also when I enter into those spaces, all the warm joy of art.
I love that. That is so deep.
Just drains
gone. And I'm left with this feeling of like, oh, this is something I can only exist in the peripheries of.
You're not.
Even when I'm doing well. And
Even when it's your show.
even when it's well, then it's not, because a lot more.
Hyper visibility that then exists.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
That is still not a safe space.
But it's like something that I'm thinking is. I know it's not unique, and my partner's a performer, so he's living in it. When he works, he's working in spaces of community and exchange and ideas, and he does a day job sometimes, you know, half the week, and does his art half the week. But it's just interesting, his joie de vivre around his art. And though I feel it when I'm in the studio. The minute I leave, it's like it evaporates. And I think that's around community and finding spaces of likeness and kind of outside of just making. Because then you're just a producer.
Artists, but also producers. Producing is a job. Like,
yes,
you know, as well as the curators, the producers are very important. They make it happen. You need them to support you, and the people who write about art and the audiences, because you need to. I guess you need to feel that around you to feel that it's real.
I try and bring people into the studio just to fill it up, almost to fill it up, and you know, talk about things a lot.
I think so. For this in particular, it didn't feel like a show until the opening night. Because I'd had the privilege of doing studio visits and meeting you and talking to you and having, you know, video conversations, but I had not been surrounded by blackness. And to have that, like, was emotional. Like the afters, as Nee and Kieran, who took a lot of photos that night when we like post show, dubbed it, like, I got emotional because I was like, I wish this was the artist.
You wish this was live all the time.
I wish I could say something and not have someone go at 9 a.m. tomorrow, oh, we found you to be a little bit aggressive, we found you to be a little bit negative in that moment.
I will say America is that.
What did you say?
I went to America recently. I went to LA, and I was like, I went to an event, and I was having like an identity crisis of the blackness. The freedom of the blackness, the joy of the blackness, the elevation of it. Not the wealth, but the kind of cultural wealth.
And the understanding.
It's
a closeness.
Of it. It was very welcoming, and it really bolstered me.
Can I say something? Sorry.
We can. We're almost at the end, but yes, please.
In terms of dance, performance, I wouldn't imagine it being more communal. I think there's a lot of conversations about how funding has driven solo practice. So it's very difficult for us to make group work because we can't get the money to pay people.
Wow.
So most of us are driven into solo practice or for a long time. So if you look at my back catalogue of work, most of it is by myself, and I'm only now 10 years plus getting even a sniff at the money that would mean I can pay 6 dancers for their time. So a lot of us have been working alone for a long time and are really exhausted by that and feel very similarly to visual artists. I just wanted to put that there. The thing that I felt at the show, which even though we haven't touched on it really today, is, and something that like Egenou X, an artist, says to me all the time and has for a long time, is it's actually the work. It's the work. Like so often when we get together, we do and should and need to talk about our identity, but actually the thing about the show was like, look at this work. It's good. The work's good. It's thoughtful. Like people are talented, but so many people are talented. There's more talent in this world than we know what to do with. So I don't ride on talent necessarily. But when I stood in that room and looked at the materiality, the structure, the technicality, the diligence that people are putting in their practice for 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years. I was like, yo, I was so overwhelmed by looking at people's work. Some people who I know, but I don't get to see your work in person. Like maybe at one picture you're opening, but I'm not at your show in Germany. I'm not at your show like wherever, you know what I mean? But like looking at it, I guess I was impressed. I was impressed by our skill.
You were inspired, but not just by the talent, but by the work and by the tenacity to keep going, to then get to the point by that.
I mean, that's a cute wrap up. It's not exactly what I said.
You caught me because I
Hilarious. We feel like we've got so much more to say. I'm like, and he just got started.
Add like a last thing of like, maybe it's about the intention of why I chose particular work to go into that particular show. So I called it Silence after Audre Lorde's Your Silence Will Not Protect You. I wanted that piece to feel like a bit like an incendiary. Like I want it to catch fire. I want people, yes, while you're looking at it, it looks like you're in the middle of flames. Because I was also furious, right? Like there's a lot that we as Black women have, yes, from an identity perspective, been dealing with. But I don't feel like we've been demanding enough. I don't feel like we've been making it impossible to fuck with us enough. And that's what I wanted that work to do. And that's what I wanted people to see it. And maybe be a little bit frightened, sure. It's, yes, it looks like it will entice you with all this like glossy beauty, whatever. But once you're in front of it for long enough, it's a little uncomfortable. But that for me is where there's a difference between if I'm making art to go in a public space, to be encountered and to have a public engagement. Yes, I want you to know that I'm good at what I do. I've been putting the work into what I'm doing. But I also want you to think about how you treat
people when you're doing it.
You know, and so I do want it to be a sparking something in a person, and for that to come from emotion.
And all the work is actually.
And
I think
like when you look at
everyone was like,
the important thing is, I think, and I hope I did this for everyone, was like, what would you like to be in the show?
You did.
Because I think like often it's like, oh, you did this thing, can we show it? It's like, what, like this is the context, this is the venue, this is potentially an audience that we know will come. We want to try and reach more than that. We can't guarantee anything. What are you doing now? What do you want to say? In the context of being with 40 other artists, is there anything that you would like to be shown in that moment for you?
And I think that's the beauty of the show, is because our voices are actually being heard. You know, you asked us what we want to show. How often do we get asked that?
Sometimes
and listen to.
Listen to.
You might get asked.
So actually, I'd like to show this new thing that we'd like that.
It's like that works for us.
That works for us.
Actually, this is working for me today.
Yes,
this is what I want to
You all
speak
got to start
about.
your own conversation, I guess, with the piece you're presenting.
That's right. But the curation, the way it wasn't a one-way or one-sided conversation, I thought that's the beauty of the curation. It's one thing to say, give me what you want to give me, but then how to make it make sense. maybe we are talking about similar things, and
Yeah.
we're all bringing our individual voices to it.
Yeah.
And the fact that it made sense together, I think also says a lot, both about your curation, but also where we are at this time in art.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Creation is
There's
love.
a lot of BS.
It's a very curator thing to say also. Creating is BS as a curator. Yes, it is. It totally is.
It is, because imagine if you were all like, nah. Like, what, legit, what would there be?
I don't know, very nice architecture.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. We're at time. I'm so sorry. I want to continue it, and we will continue it, but we're over an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, this is cute.
This is very cute.
We could have gone for another.
Yeah,
We
we
need
need
to speak all day.
more to say.
Yeah, I was like, that is cute, but I didn't say all of that.
And I want to come back to you about what you said about not